You're sat at your boring office job typing away when you receive a memo from a coworker that looks polished, but the data's shallow, the reasoning's fuzzy, and now you're the one that's going to have to fix it because it needs done ASAP. This isn't the first time either. You're finding it's happening more and more as your coworkers lean on AI to get their work done for them. In fact, you suspect this is creating more work than it's actually saving. Now, there's a buzzy new term for what you're experiencing: Workslop. But why is this happening? What are the potential costs? How do we fix it? And, as always seems to be the question, is the AI juice worth the squeeze? This is the internet eating itself, and let's get into it. Workslop entered the public's lexicon last month with the publication of a joint study by Stanford University researchers and a workplace consulting firm, BetterUp Labs, in the Harvard Business Review. It defines it as AI-generated work content that masquerades as good work, but lacks the substance to meaningfully advance a given task. Workslop is yet another genre of the AI slop that's flooding every aspect of our lives, whether that be art, music, graphic design, journalism, YouTube videos, TikToks, Reels, video essays, it's everywhere. Like any other kind of AI slop, it might be polished on the surface, in this context having good grammar and professional language, but it's hollow underneath and doesn't stand up to much scrutiny. And if people can't be bothered to create their own art, then I think you'd be hard-pressed to find people handcrafting their office work purely out of love for the game. And because of how Workslop's generated, it can scale and permeate workflows more subtly and pervasively. Workslop might be a memo with vague goals, hallucinated data, or misaligned to the task at hand. Or maybe a report where the narrative is generic and missing company-specific insights. If you've recently worked in any kind of white-collar job, there's a good chance you've already encountered it, possibly from someone who doesn't realize how obvious it is. The Stanford study surveyed 1,150 US-based full-time employees across various industries, with 40% having received Workslop in the last month. For those that had encountered Workslop, insanely, an average of 15.4% of the content they receive at work qualifies. What this means in real terms is time spent rewriting or fixing colleagues' AI-generated drafts, as well as awkward conversations to ask them to, do their fucking jobs. The study was able to quantify the cost of this using the salary of the employees surveyed and estimates of the cost of their time to a business, arriving at a figure of $186 per employee per month. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the figure was higher, as it's hard to quantify the impact of something quite subtle like this. It may be the case that employees are having to spend time fixing slop without even realizing it's AI slop, instead of good old-fashioned human slop. This issue also had consequences in the form of colleagues being perceived as less creative, less capable, and less reliable. This Workslop phenomenon goes against a very pro-AI narrative among much of the business community. For example, the St. Louis Federal Reserve found that for an individual working 40 hours per week, saving 5.4% of work hours implies a time saving of 2.2 hours per week. But while there's clearly time-saving potential for AI, there's also something of a productivity paradox emerging, where little measurable ROI is being seen from implementations of AI so far. Similarly, a series of 4 studies earlier this year found that humans were more productive with generative AI, but less motivated. In their own words, transitioning from collaboration with Gen AI to solo work led to an increased sense of control of human workers, and was also accompanied by significant decreases in intrinsic motivation and increases in feelings of boredom. This decreased motivation and those feelings of boredom are potentially hidden penalties of AI use in businesses that may not even be recognized as being caused by AI, especially by senior figures who are already all in on AI. And, of course, this can all have consequences for workers' quality of life. But who cares about that? It does beg the question of how we got here though, into a situation where this new tool is being used so broadly and yet without a clear picture of its benefits. If you're a quote, knowledge worker, then there's a good chance you've been bombarded with vague demands by senior leadership to use AI for everything, or if you build stuff, to put AI in it. A desire to meet these demands, along with trying to meet the ever-increasing load of work that employees find themselves under, has led to superficial use of AI. What this means in real terms is a lot of copying and pasting instead of critically evaluating the output of these tools and editing them, which is generally needed most of the time. A big part of LLM's success and how they've become pervasive so quickly is their ease of use. You can talk to them like a human, and they're pretty good at understanding what you're trying to convey, even if you don't convey it very clearly. The problem is, this only goes so far, and a good prompt can be the difference between something that's useless and useful. This has come to be termed AI fluency, and a recent study of 2,739 subjects found that higher AI fluency correlated with better productivity and performance. Without fluency, workers are more likely to stumble over common issues with generative AI, like hallucinations and ChatGPT-isms, or simply expect more of generative AI than it's currently capable of. The result of this is Workslop. But more than anything, the problem with using AI in a business context is exactly that: context. AI, which often really means LLMs, can't factor in all the elements of a business, a team, an industry, and the project when completing tasks. There's verbal conversations that aren't recorded, or there aren't notes for, or there are previous meetings that don't relate to the project at hand but might have significance. It is possible to integrate a lot of information like this, but often it's impractical to do so, and there's also the classic problem of context windows. The reality is, AI implementations just aren't where they need to be for most businesses to avoid churning up all this work slop. What that means in 2025 is a lot of time lost fixing and reworking drafts written with AI, whether that be presentations or important emails or even business-critical calculations. And when Workslop isn't caught, it has the potential to have a negative knock-on effect further down the chain, as poor business decisions are made off the back of incorrect or half-baked information, and clarifications are required when they wouldn't be otherwise. It was just a little confusing to understand what was actually going on in the email and what he actually meant to say. It probably took over an hour or two of time just to congregate everybody and repeat the information in a clear and concise way. Employees end up being the cleanup crews for others' messes and even their own, instead of doing the work that actually produces value. When asked about their experience with Workslop, one individual contributor in finance described the impact of receiving work that was AI generated. It created a situation where I had to decide whether I would rewrite it myself, make him rewrite it, or just call it good enough. It's furthering the agenda of creating a mentally lazy, slow-thinking society that will become wholly dependent upon outside forces. He's not entirely wrong about that last part either, as recent research from Microsoft also suggests that our reliance on AI is atrophying our own cognitive abilities. A director in retail said, "I had to waste more time following up on the information and checking it with my own research. I then had to waste even more time setting up meetings with other supervisors to address the issue. Then I continued to waste my own time having to redo the work myself." You can sense from these responses that the survey turned up very real frustrations from those who've been on the receiving end of Workslop. The data from the survey shows that this undermined their perception of those colleagues too, with the majority saying it made them think the sloppy colleague is less creative, and a sizable chunk thinking that they're less capable, reliable, trustworthy, and even intelligent. 34% of people who receive Workslop even reported notifying teammates or managers of these incidents, potentially eroding trust further. There's very real financial costs to this too. Based off that $186 per month per employee figure, for an organization of 10,000 workers, given the estimated prevalence of Workslop, 41%, this yields over $9 million per year in lost productivity. For many workers though, work feels meaningless and leaves them burnt out and fatigued, and that was the case well before ChatGPT was unleashed on the public, so it should be no surprise that they aren't putting in much more than the bare minimum. If employees feel like they can get by well enough with a tool that saves them time, they're going to give it a go, as Workslop is evidence of. What the existence of Workslop teaches us more than anything is that a lot of employees don't see much difference between the slop that generative AI churns out and the work they're actually meant to be doing. It's all slop. Some employees have just proven adept at leveraging AI to produce the right kind of slop. Valuable slop. If social media has taught us anything, it's that there's actually a big appetite for slop if it's packaged in the right way. But what do you think? Have you experienced Workslop at your job? Have you yourself been slopping it up in the office? Let me know in the comments down below and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. Until next time, see ya.